You're going to be live in about 5 seconds.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on our special edition of Drop the Mic 2020. We've been at this for weeks now. It is our way of educating people about where the money goes, where your money goes. It's our money, our tax dollars. And Drop the mic actually stands for the military industrial complex. If you've had the opportunity to join us before, you know that our discretionary budget is about $1.19 trillion, and that's 61%. Yes, no exaggeration. About 61% of that budget goes towards the military industrial complex, the Pentagon. That money does not go to our veterans out there on the streets who are suffering. It does not go to people who are enlisted persons right now. It goes to the military industrial complex. And if we have 61% of the discretionary budget going there, that means that a lot of our domestic needs, think healthcare, education, infrastructure, money is not going there. So where does the money go? It is your money, and we're going to continue talking about that and why we should all care. I am so excited this afternoon, even though I am being very reserved, cool, calm, and collected, to have Jodie Evans here. Oh my God. And she is one of the co-founders and directors of CODEPINK. And CODEPINK is really badass women who got together in 2002 to protest war, and they created something beautiful and fierce in terms of standing up against war, standing up for our domestic needs, and showing a whole lot of love and strength and hope. And Jodie, I am so excited that you and I get a chance to come together in this way. Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm so excited. I can't believe I get to be with you, Senator Turner. Thank you so much for having me on. And thank you so much for your leadership. You have inspired me this last year. You know, when it gets bad, it's like, you do not back down.
Thank you. I try. My God, I really do. And, you know, I'm so glad that our brother, Ben Cohen, has been at this for 30 years and really trying to educate people about military spending and how this makes us less safe. So you have a quote that is behind you that when we were talking even before we went live, that has my mind racing. I will not raise my children to kill another mother's children. That is so fierce. That is so viscerally piercing. Can you talk to us about that quote, who said it, and why do you have that proudly behind you right now?
Well, this was written by Julia Ward Howe, who wrote the Mother's Day Proclamation right after the Civil War. And this is one of my favorite quotes out of it, because if we raise our children not to kill another mother's child, that's peace. I mean, the understanding that we are all connected and that there is no excuse for violence and murder. I mean, it's at the core of religions, you don't kill anybody. And somehow we've, you know, we raise the Bible, but kill people. So her call was for women to gather in Washington to find a way to create peace. And the Mother's Day was created out of that call, which then got co-opted by Hallmark cards and capitalism. But for many, many years, we showed up in front of the White House, 24-hour vigil, and brought women from war zones to school us on what it's like to be a mother in a war zone, what it's like to be a mother who's a refugee, what it's like to be at the effects of US militarism and imperialism, so that we could then be educated and continue our work each year to end the funding of war. So she's one of our inspirations.
I mean, that quote itself is just so profound, and it's something that I encourage everybody who is listening to us and watching us this afternoon to really think about what she was saying. And Jodie, on that point, to hear the term peace, people may say, you know, Joe, you know, you guys are naive. How are we going to have peace? What would you say to that? Because I hear that all the time, that peace really means that we want to make this country vulnerable, because if we're peaceful and other nations are not, does that make us vulnerable? So what does the whole notion of peace really mean in a practical way?
Well, for starters, peace takes effort. It takes relationship. And we live in a war economy. So, you know, I looked at one day and I went, we have growing global inequality, climate change, $1.4 trillion of weapons sold each year. And I'd been, you know, part of CODEPINK working to end war for many years, and all of a sudden went, oh my God, we're not going to be able to end war until we end the war economy. War just serves the war economy. So what we invest in is a protection of property, of profit, of greed, and we don't invest anything in peace. So, you know, peace takes time. It takes listening. It takes a commitment. It takes being uncomfortable. War is lazy. I mean, to pick up and bomb someone, that's lazy, stupid, immoral, irrational. It creates more violence. It creates whole cultures of violence. Look at what we've done since the Iraq War. I mean, one of the things we did a vigil outside of the White House every day for, you know, 6 months. And in the middle of that, when it was looking like we were not going to be able to stop this war, we went to Iraq. Not invited, you know, no visa. We landed in Amman, drove across the desert, went inside Iraq. Beautiful country. What, this is our enemy? These people who are so happy to see us, so generous, so kind, so thoughtful. Most educated country per capita in the world.
Wow.
Most educated per capita country in the world that had been devastated by our sanctions. Don't forget the Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, when confronted by, do you know these sanctions have killed 500,000 children? She said, well, that's acceptable collateral damage.
And that could have been us, you know, that could be our babies.
But it is our baby. We are human beings. To think that people in Iraq are separate from who we are, that's the first problem. That is the first problem of war. And that is what peace is about. Peace is a shared well-being on the planet. So the war economy is extractive, destructive, and oppressive. But there is a peace economy. And it is the giving, sharing, caring, thriving, relational, resilient economy without which none of us would be alive. We are alive because of a peace economy, but we have been convinced that this war economy, this capitalist, imperialist, violent, destructive economy is what keeps us alive and safe. And it's a lie. And we've been sold a bill of goods. We keep giving our life, our time, our talent, our hearts to it, while it's destroying the very fabric of our culture, our civilization, the planet. I mean, it's destructive, but we've been convinced that that's what health is. I just want to take you back to like why I ended up in Washington, which will kind of take you, it's like, because peace is relational. Peace is, it starts with us, right?
Yeah.
So I had been running Jerry Brown's presidential campaign in '92. The Watts uprising happened, and I brought Jerry off the road. We went down, and I really got to learn about a neighborhood in my city that I didn't know much about. And there, 20,000 people had been killed. And nobody talks about it. It was like, in my own city, how did I not know this? So the cops get taken away from the mayor and given to a community council. And we convinced, I meet this guy, Akila Shirelles, who did the truce between the Crips and the Bloods the night before, which saved a lot of lives. And he got funded to create peace in the community. So it was money that would have gone to the cops. It went to him, and it was about healing. It was about well-being. So all of these kids, you know, who hadn't had a good education, didn't have anyone at home. So one day, naively, I say to him, well, let's bring a lot of guys together, a lot of men, and show the men that men are all alike. And we go around the room, and it's a billionaire, it's the governor for Jerry Brown, it's a famous football player, famous actor, Tom Hayden.
Mhm.
And I think we go around the room and they have, serious issues with their dads.
Mhm.
But guess what? Every single one of those gang members, their dad had been in Vietnam.
Oh my.
That war had come home to the community. Nobody had talked about it because they're Black and brown people. And it must be about them, not about the culture, not about the fact that we illegally, immorally sent them to a war to kill people who just wanted equality, who
Yeah.
just wanted the system of peace for everyone. No, we sent them to destroy innocent, good people who had big hearts and wanted to create a structure of peace. So, I saw that, and then I hear Bush, trying to send us to war. First of all, he's frightening the American people with the color-coded alerts, red, orange, and yellow. So we call Code Pink for peace. But then he's saying, oh, we have to, it's a preemptive strike, right? They might have a gun, so we're going to kill them. I'm like, that's like me being in Watts. That's every cop who's like, oh, that's a Black guy. He must have a gun in his pocket, so I get to kill him. And I'm like, that's wrong. That doesn't work. So I fly myself and meet a bunch of girlfriends, and we call Code Pink and sit outside the White House. But I want you to know, Akila has been working in Newark, New Jersey for the last 5 years with Roz Baraka. And Roz took money from the police, gave it to Akila to create well-being in his community. And look at what happened in Newark in the last 3 weeks. There was an uprising, but those people belong to that community. There wasn't looting, because it's like, this is our community. We have been engaged in it. We've been, our wellness matters. The well-being of our community matters. But when you're not connected, when you've been violated every day, of course you want to violate the violator. Of course, the violence that people in this country have to swallow every day. The poor, people of color, those that have been left behind. I mean, it sickens me. I mean, sometimes I have to just close down because it's so overwhelming. But that is the war economy. So war, then, we take 60, as you said, 61 cents of our tax dollars, our hard-earned money, and it then goes and violates cultures all over the world, beautiful cultures. I mean, our bombing, I just want to name it, Hillary Clinton's bombing of Libya. Yes. That devastation, that is us. That is our money. Our fingerprints are on it. They are bloody. Not only destroyed a socialist culture that creates well-being for all, bombed and left weapons, left the structure of violence to be spread across Northern Africa, my favorite country, Mali, a peaceful, loving, old, intelligent, wise culture being violated by Hillary Clinton getting to use our money to drop bombs on Libya. It's, for me, it's like Watts in the city of Los Angeles. It's like AFRICOM, starting AFRICOM that becomes, permission to bring more military into Africa as we steal resources like underneath them and pretend we're doing good. It's a violation that's profound.
And Jodie, this violation, I mean, you're just making me go back in my mind, like the historian in me, to think about what has happened to Africa as a continent in its totality, that it was carved out among a few European nations. You take this half France, you take this half Great Britain, Spain, you take this, I mean, just totally, that's what imperialism, colonialism.
That's Iraq, that's Iran, that, the white imperialists, going in, and Mauritania, this amazing country I went to, and somebody in Washington drew a line across the country and said the capital's here. Never had been there. Korea, we went to Korea and we walked from North Korea to South Korea for the unification and peace with Korea. It was some guy in Washington, D.C. drew the line across Korea, a line that has separated families for 70 years. Imagine your mom not being able to see your child across a line that was held in place by the United States government?
And
Why
gave
did
no,
General Eisenhower say, beware the congressional military industrial complex? Because when he saw what the United States had done to Korea, he cried and said, make it end, make it end. But how they ended it, put in place more violence. You know, at the core of a hand that acts from violence is violence, no matter what you pretend to be doing.
no, I mean, and I mean, this is just, and I know you make documentaries, you are a storyteller, and it is through stories that we get people to really connect. And two things that you said to me that, oh my God, just making me want to jump out of my skin. One is when you were telling the stories about going and talking to those mothers and the impact of what happens to other mothers' children. And when I said those could have been our children, and you're like, no, those are our children. That is the way we should look at it. That what affects one directly, as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, affects us all indirectly. And then about the profit motive of the war economy, which leads me to a quote that Ben Cohen and I talk about all the time. And I'm sure this is going to be familiar to you. Asa Philip Randolph once said, make war unprofitable and you make them impossible. And that's really the root cause. I mean, it really is as simple as that, as hard as it is for us to grapple with. And I mean, Jodie, you holding school, Ms. Evans, you holding class today, which is, you know, an absolutely beautiful.
Well, let's go to that profit. So you talk about the 61% of our tax dollars. Half of that goes to military contract companies that make weapons, right?
Yes.
So think about this. They make a profit, and they were making a handsome profit. That means we just took your tax dollars, we gave it to a weapons company, and we made the rich richer. We didn't we made the rich richer. I mean, I co-executive produced a film called The Shadow World about weapons trade. I mean, if you want to have your toes curled, it was really hard to make it so you can make it through the end of the film because we're so freaking ugly. And so the weapons trader, the really gross, ugly, sick-minded weapons trader said, I don't understand why they don't just trade money, because they're putting weapons out there and they're dangerous. It's just like, even the weapons trader knew this isn't about weapons. This is about greed. This is about money. And why do we allow a friend like Saudi Arabia? By the way, the people that took down 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia, not Iraq, not Afghanistan. And, CODEPINK, since we went to war with Iraq, has been talking about the problem is Saudi Arabia. Oh, no, 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 no. All the folks in the US, the politicians and the capitalists, they run off Saudi Arabia and blow smoke up the ass of the prince while he has activists in jail, tortured, while he wasn't letting women drive. Well, women are, held back to another century in a lack of freedom and even agency to be a human being themselves. So
we pick as a nation who we want the American people to love and admire and who we want them to hate and hold in disdain.
Well, it's kind of why when Trump got in, we realized we're not gonna, he's Teflon. How do we build the movement we need to actually move money out of the Pentagon? And it was again to follow the money, because weapons make it through Congress because they figured out how to put a piece of the weapon in every congressional district. And then they say, you're going to lose jobs. But guess what? It's also in the sinewy of our cities, our counties, our states, our schools, our churches, our pension funds, that all of these things that have our money are invested in weapons. So basically we are making a killing on killing. So we took our work to the communities, and because we need to educate people on war. It's so abstract. Really but when you make it like, oh, I'm going to school, or I'm in a church that's committed to peace and love, but we're investing in weapons that right now are killing innocent people in Yemen. I mean, let's just talk about innocent people too. Do you know that the 4 million people in Afghanistan and Iraq have been killed mostly are innocent people? And here's World War I. It was more like 3%, maybe 1% were innocents got killed. Right now, it's combatants are 1 to 3% that get killed. And
Totally reversed.
one of the, pardon?
It's totally
Other way around. Yes, mostly innocent people. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, with sanctions right now, our hybrid war we have on Venezuela and Iran and Cuba and another 20 some countries, sanctions, we don't feel a death. We just get to kill people. No, it's like drones, drones still affect the pilot and they still go crazy and kill themselves. Sanctions, they just kill people. I mean, and we're in a hybrid war on that right now in COVID. Well, I mean, in Yemen, Black and brown people that we are killing every day in Yemen, in Venezuela. I mean, we are doing that. I mean, that's our tax dollars are used to screw. I mean, they call them, extreme. They know they're just like, it is a knee on the neck of these countries. They can't breathe. And they say they can't breathe. We have been there. They are trying to just destroy them. And that's not even shown. But innocent people, I just want to go back to Guantanamo. In Guantanamo, 97% of people in Guantanamo were innocent. Why? The Bush administration just went out and said, we're going to give you $5,000, give us a lie about somebody and we'll put them in Guantanamo so we can look cool, right? So we can say we can make Americans feel safe, right? That doesn't make us safe. That makes whole communities know that we're liars, violent, and there's no justice. But Obama, he took drones and he killed people instead of putting them in Guantanamo. So he would be told to go like he'd have Kill Tuesdays and say, go, drone this and drone that. And Medea wrote a book about drones and she disrupted him a few times and drone strikes went way down. But before they did,
it breeds resentment, Jodie. I mean,
breeds resentment. Let me tell you, in Pakistan, we went to see communities that had been droned and communities that had huge loss. One tribal leader came to the meeting and he described the coming home from his son had graduated from school and was going to be the teacher for the community. He went to buy all the resources to make a party for him. He came back and his brother and his son were splattered all over the wall. His house had been, just destroyed. And he's like a tribal leader in Pakistan, right? In the middle of freaking nowhere. They don't even know what the United, as far from any care about our safety as there can be. And he describes this and it's like really descriptive. So we're just all crying. And one of the CODEPINK women said, if you had a drone and you could fly it over the United States, what would you do? Mm-hmm. And he said, nothing, it would kill innocent people. Yeah. We killed that man's family. That is peace. We are killing peace. I mean, Iran is a peaceful country. It is, it's not even a capitalist country. It's a country of giving and sharing and kindness. You go there, we've been strangling them. Everyone still wants to give. They don't know how to be in relationship with you without offering a gift. I buy something at a store, I'm given a gift. Invited into homes where they have nothing because their relationship is about how we care for each other, which is what peace is. And Akila in Newark, when the New York Times said, what are you doing? He says, it's not about the stats. Yes, we've stopped murder. Yes, we've stopped all these things, but it's not about the stats. It's about creating well-being in the community. And we have stolen all this tax money which is given to the state to take care of the people. And it has been stolen by the imperialist, violent corporations to create more violence, more weapons, and more war. And when I was in Iraq and I got into Bremer's office, I would find my way in every day and disrupt. I got to meet his head of intelligence. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm, still naively thinking this is something that I can stop. Yeah. And he said, they were firing the police and the military. And I said, you're going to create hell on earth. and they're going to point those guns at you. You know, you can't take dignified people and leave them, you know, unemployed. That violates the whole society. He says, oh yeah, well, we want to do that. We want to create chaos. We want to keep a dog hungry so they'll follow us anywhere. That was the head of intelligence in Bremer's office in Iraq.
Yeah, that's it's very biting, it's very troubling for the American psyche for us to wrap our minds around what you are sharing with us right now. But it is so important that we continue to have dialogue like this so we can open more eyes and get people more involved to care about where our money is going and to know. And Jodie, I remind folks all the time, it is indeed our money, because the politicians make us think it's their money and they're doing us the favor of spending it here or spending it there. No, it's our money and we are the bosses and we got to take back our power. I want to shout out CODEPINK. And to learn more, go to codepink.org/divest. That is codepink.org/divest. And Jodie, I want to shout out some other organizations that are doing the thing in fellowship and sistership with CODEPINK, and that's Common Defense, About Face, Peace Action, and Our Revolution. And I know there are others, but I definitely want to shout those out. So Common Defense, About Face, Peace Action, Our Revolution, CODEPINK, doing the daggone thing. And Jay, I want you to talk, because you educate, inspire, activate. I want people to know how they can get involved. But before we go there, we have a couple of questions. One, oh man, I'm messing up Sharucha's. I am Oh Lord, I'm messing up her name. Please forgive me. Every time I go to pronounce her name, I always mispronounce her name. So please forgive me. But she says we should connect the dots between our military exploits, our endless need for everyone's resources, and climate change. And I totally agree with her on that.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
So, you know, when we went to Iraq, the Iraqis would say, yeah, it's like the Americans come and they say, that's your oil under our sand. You know, it's like,
right.
It's like, they're like, first of all, Iraqis wish they didn't have that oil because they know that they just lost everything because of that oil. But we do it in Africa. Look what we just did to an indigenous leader in Bolivia. We sent our generals down with money, bribed their generals, and did a coup. Why? Because we need what's under their rocks for the batteries of our cars. And, you know, it's, where does it, oh, I mean, what they do in the Congo, I mean, you know, raping the Congo for every resource it has, creating militarism and violence and a rape culture that's destructive. But, you know, the other thing is what's the most destructive thing to the planet is war. It's the largest user of fossil fuel. The wars are about oil, they are about resources, and what it does, the toxicities that it leaves behind. I mean, I have a friend whose son is, you know, an Agent Orange child. It's a horrible thing. But if you look in Iraq, if you look at Fallujah, if you look at some of the places where we use phosphorus and weapons that we shouldn't have, the birth defect rate is through the roof. And we've got sites that you can't grow anything on because of the horrible devastation of all the chemicals that are part of war. You know, you can look on our site, we're also trying to stop weapons being, you know, tried out in the waters outside of Hawaii. That's going to happen this summer. And then another thing that doesn't get told, I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada, outside the test site. You know, when they first started testing the bomb in the early 50s, they did it above ground. My mother and grandmother took me when I was a little baby to watch the explosion, and all three of us had cancer. But the wind was blowing the other way, and the cancer in southern Utah devastated southern Utah. And studies show that probably close to 1 million people have died in the United States from the testing of nuclear weapons, something that's not talked about. So when we think it's over there, it's not over there. the war always comes home to our communities, and we see it come home. We saw it, in Ferguson with tanks and military weapons being pointed at people who pay for those services. That is not a peacekeeper. That is the militarism coming home, and the militarism has always been there. The violence against Black and brown people has always been there. Policing was created for slavery.
Oh, slave catchers.
Yeah. So that's the core of policing. So we know it's not about.
I mean, and what we're talking about in terms of the military budget, the military industrial complex budget, and how that reflects on us in terms of our policing. I mean, the 1994 crime bill allowed for those military weapons to be given domestically on the streets. Policing is supposed to be about protecting and serving, but in reality, it is more about, especially in Black communities in particular, it is about occupying and bossing around and seeing as somehow more seeing the Black community as subhuman. I mean, let's just be honest. You cannot put your full force and weight on somebody's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds with your hands in your pocket and have any care and compassion, even as people walk up to you and say to you, he's bleeding out of his nose. That police officer did not flinch. And he is just a reflection of law enforcement officers, not all of them, but this is not about the individuals who perpetrate these acts while wearing the badge and the gun. This is about a system that has been breeding for generations. And Jodie, to me, that is the part that we are less willing to deal with. We got to get at the root of this thing. Cause.
Yeah, but so the root cause is that we live in a war economy, exactly as you say. And when you describe what you just described, that is what we are doing right now to Black and brown people in Yemen. We are not seeing them as human. We are bombing them. They are, the biggest humanitarian crisis on the planet. No one is listening. We're all standing here doing our thing while we sell weapons to Saudi Arabia. And by the way, we could have stopped that. We got enough Republican votes, but what? The Democrats who take money from weapons companies voted for that sale to happen.
Don't get me started on that.
Okay. We tell them where to bomb, which we're not accurate about anyway, and we refuel their planes in the air. Those are our bloody hands on Yemen, which all innocent people, there's not like this is innocent people. This isn't people this isn't making us safer, this is making us less safe. All that $7 trillion that we spend on Iraq and Afghanistan, that has made the world a less safe space, because we have destroyed entire countries. I mean, how many refugees displaced, how many people, millions and millions of people don't live at home. I want to tell you, so the women I know that I talk to from Iraq that live in other countries, I try to have conversations with them and they say, I'm just existing, I'm not living. I'm Iraqi. I was stripped from my home and I won't be the same. This is not life. And, let's just remember, Iraq was a beautiful place. Iraq was, the garden of the planet. And
every day, I mean, they don't deserve it. And when I say that could be us, meaning that, for us to switch places, we would want somebody to care that is happening and what our role, and when I say our, I mean our collective American role is in causing this kind of devastation to other people across the globe. I mean, this whole Eurocentric, imperialistic, colonial, manifest destiny mentality has us where we are today. But it doesn't have to be the reality. It doesn't have to be the future, right? It may be a reality.
So we've got some things we got to talk about.
Right? So that's why we got places like CODEPINK. Before we go there, Jodie, we have a question for you. And this question comes from Aaron, I believe is how that's pronounced. You guys, please forgive me if I am mispronouncing people's names. It has been quite a day for me. Question for Jodie, are you seeing similar propaganda tactics today with respect to war in Iran that we saw in 2003 with the war in Iraq?
Yes, the similar tactics are always used. It's always propaganda. They're always the other. They're always lied about. Maybe let's frighten the American people about them. That's happening around Cuba, Venezuela, China, Iran. I mean, anybody that they want to create as the enemy, one of the first things we have to do is like, we're not enemies. The only enemy to the planet is the United States government. I mean, Martin Luther King.
Jodie, some people would push back. Let me push back on that. Jodie, are you saying that China is doing right by the planet? Are you saying that other nations
are they using weapons against other people? Martin Luther King said we're the greatest terrorist on the planet. We're the ones with the weapons. We're the ones selling them, making them, dropping them. So, why is China the enemy? Why are we making China the enemy? So they want to build up more money in the Pentagon, more nuclear weapons. Right now we have more nuclear warheads than hospitals. So it's like, if we make the enemy, then you're going to vote our budget. If we show you, but so I just want to say something super exciting happened yesterday. Barbara Lee put forth an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act to cut the Pentagon by $350 billion.
Yes.
And these things happen in a process. It started with Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign wanting to do an audit for poor people and discovering where the money is. The money's in war. We need to bring it home. CODEPINK mission statement, end war, bring the money home to the life-giving needs of our community. So, it was Reverend Barber working with the Institute for Policy Studies, broke it down and said, no, this isn't pie in the sky. Item by item, we can tell you, it's $68 billion out of overseas contingency operators, and 60% overseas contingency operations account is a slush fund, a $68 billion slush fund that the military uses. No accountability. Of course, there's actually no accountability in the Pentagon. It's been audited. Every audit fails. The fancy untrackable accounting, how many billions of dollars don't even have a receipt. So, we should know that. Like, we have to be accountable. We have to live within budgets. We have to show, what we spend money on. The Pentagon doesn't. They get to do whatever they want. But cutting unnecessary weapons, $57 billion. Eliminating the Space Force, which is a boondoggle and not what we want to do to space either. $3 billion. Military overhead, $38 billion. Reducing our presence in Afghanistan, $23 billion. It's a line item. It's line itemed. We could do this.
What you're saying, we need elected officials who have courage, backbone, the will to do these things. And so shout out, you must have been, we're not together in the same room, but we are on the same wavelength, because I have Congresswoman Barbara Lee right here to quote something that she actually put out on social media. Restorative justice means we no longer spend more money on police and military budgets than education and social services. It's not complicated, she goes on to say, and then hashtag Black Lives Matter. But you and I are on that same wavelength. And I want to shout out Congresswoman Barbara Lee, as we often do on Drop the Mic 2020, for her consistency and her courage and her compassion. All of those things go together. Consistency, courage, and compassion can and do go together. And she certainly has been stellar in her efforts to draw more attention to how that money is spent and how we can better spend it to edify, to enrich, to live. And just one of my biggest fears is that people just don't believe that we can have nice things. This just does not compute, because we have been socialized, as you so eloquently laid out, that a war economy makes us more safe. And particularly men, but not exclusively men, because we have war hawks in the Congress of all of the genders. But this whole notion that the biggest gun, the biggest missile, the biggest this, I got to slap you down the first chance I get. is really how we are socialized as a nation. And it is especially how our boys are raised to think and to believe. And that if you do not have that persona, that somehow you are less than a man. And it is that patriarchal energy, you know, the way that toxic masculinity, not being masculine is not, it's not a bad thing, but the toxic masculinity, that
Well, when
belief.
you haven't been, so many times it's about not being cared for and not being able to be invited into your feelings. When we were doing the circles and Watts, it was how many of these young men had not been allowed to actually experience and wrestle with their own feelings. So, there is so much. So you asked about peace at the beginning. We need to invest in peace, which is well-being.
How do we do that, Jodie? How do
We
we
move the money into education, into caring, into all the things that create wellness, and we starve them. Every year we starve them more. Essential, we've learned what is essential. COVID has taught us what is essential, and it's taught us who do it. And we need to invest in everything that is essential and not be lied to about that war is essential. It is not. War is not essential. Food is essential. Good food is essential. Education is essential. Healthcare is essential.
Clean air is essential.
Clean air is essential. So the fact that we had all those planes out of the air and weren't burning all that fossil fuel, look at the birds and the animals in the streets. It's like, what else is essential? Wildness. We live inside of control, and we think that the patriarchal control is how you hold everything into place. And we live on a planet that we cannot control, and it will kick back. It will throw up a virus to close us down for a little while. It will throw up a tornado, and it will move its winds, because we have been violating the planet, and we treat the planet like we treat people, as just objects that can get us to the greed, to the more money and more money and more money. I mean, we need to get rid of billionaires. I mean, we need to look at this structure and see that it only favors a few, and it makes them crazy when they get there. It doesn't even serve them. It's like, to be rich, you've had to violate so many people on the way. And then we celebrate that. Look at the people that are rich. They've only violated their workers. They've only stolen from the lives of their workers.
Excessive greed is a problem. I mean, excessive greed is a problem. And I say that, I want to parse that out, because there are lots of people who aspire to wealth. And to me, wealth is an umbrella, and there's a lot under it. Your health is your wealth. Being loved is your wealth. Being able to meet your needs is a form of wealth. And then being able to go a step beyond that every now and then and get something that you want is wealth. Having relationship is wealth. Having healthy Mother Earth is wealth. So there are many things under that, but we are programmed to only see one thing, and that is dollar, 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 dollar. And the reason why I say excessive greed, because if you make your wealth off of the backs or through somebody else's pain, then you got to step back and say, wait a minute, this is not the way that I should be building wealth. So wealth in and of itself is not a bad thing, but excessive greed is. And the question becomes, how much does one individual need when you have so much that your children's 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 children all the way through are set, but then somebody else's child around the corner, well, not around the corner, because you're not living around the corner from those kinds of people, but in poorer neighborhoods and communities, can't even have clean water. There something has to bubble up inside of you and say that this is wrong, and what can I do to, in the words of Brother Mahatma Gandhi, be the change that I want to see in the world. I mean, Jodie, you have made, not only have you taught us a lesson today, but I am even more heavy than when I started this, because there's so much going.
Well, the thing is that hope, the only feature of hope is action. And so we give people things to do every week if they sign up for CODEPINK. And this week, it's to support Congresswoman Lee's resolution. So they can go to codepink.org and sign on, get their member of Congress to sign on. And then the other thing is that we've seen is everything important happens locally. And look at how amazing it is to be in the streets and actually change laws right now. But one of the things that you can raise up the cost of war in your community is to go after your city, your mayor, your member of Congress. We've, I think we've got 40 members of Congress to divest from taking money from weapons manufacturers. We need more, because if we're going to get them not to vote for it, we need to make it so you can't be in Congress and taking money for weapons. What would be great is that war is not for profit and it would be over. That's a resolution I would like in Congress.
That's A. Philip Randolph right there. Jodie, I mean, what you're saying is that even though there's promise in the problem, as I like to say, we are in a heavy moment and we have to acknowledge it, between COVID, between revelations that have always been there for the Black community. I'm just so surprised that people are acting surprised as if they didn't know this before Mr. George Floyd. And then we have, Mr. Brooks.
No, it's thousands.
This stuff has been happening since the first African was enslaved and brought to this continent. Black people have been crying out about a system that is unjust. And not just back then, it continues to be so, from redlining, Black codes, Jim Crow, you name it, socially, politically, economically, environmentally, you name it. Not only racism, but anti-Blackness permeates the United States of America and the way that we do business in every single aspect. So Jodie, for me, my head could explode at the way that people are acting like they did not know that this stuff was happening. And the fact that Black people need a validator at all times. In the 21st century, the smartphone has become our validator. Because unless we got somebody to back us up or something to back us up, people don't tend to believe what we say is happening to us. And that in and of itself is excruciating, that Black people need somebody or something to validate our humanity. Nobody would have believed that that officer did that to Mr. Floyd. They would have said, what did Mr. Floyd do? Or what happened to Aubrey? Or what happened to, Breonna Taylor? Jesus Christ, the no knock. I mean, this stuff is real, and it's not just, Jodie, I don't want this moment to be, I know we're fixated on reforming. I say reform and revolution. We got to have revolution ultimately. These reform steps, okay, good start. But ultimately, we got to be willing to tear this down and rebuild anew, to reimagine or to imagine what policing looks like in the United States of America and how we've got this so wrong. We have to have truth and reconciliation. We have to have restoration. But in order to have any of those things, we have to be able to admit the wrong that has been done and that continues to be done. Whether it is the military-industrial complex using our money, or our money that's poured into safety forces that do not treat communities, especially Black and brown communities, don't keep us safe at all. It breeds fear and anxiety and hatred. And it actually, not only from a national standpoint, everything you just laid down makes us less safe. When I localize it and bring it domestically, what is happening with police and other law enforcement agencies actually makes them less safe. And I got a confession that people hear me say all the time, Jodie, my baby is in law enforcement. And my heart aches every day. It ached before this stuff happened. It aches even more now, because now he's less safe. He's actually out there to protect and serve. So as a millennial Black man in America, just because he is a Black man in America, he's less safe. And now because of his chosen profession. And so people need to think about that. That is why we need total systemic reform. That's number one, to start it. And then we need absolute revolution. And people shouldn't be afraid of that. We got to get at the root of this thing and change. And it's all connected, Jodie. Everything that we're talking about today is connected. Can you give us a word of life and uplift as we close out? Again, I want to shout out CODEPINK. People can go to codepink.org/divest. As Jodie has laid out, there's an action step for you to do. When you talk about educate, inspire, activate, I am going to embrace that even in my heaviness, that there's always something that we all can do, both as individuals, but what can we do collectively? We can actually change things. And that is what CODEPINK is doing. Jodie, I'm going to give
No,
you the
we
final
can't.
word.
You got to stay in the streets. We can't let, they'll constantly try to co-opt it and say they got it fixed. They don't have it fixed. Stay in the streets, stay supportive. We give you something to do every week. And this week, today, we just launched Peace, which is, what does peace look like? Peace looks like the Cuban doctors going to 20 countries during COVID and serving those countries. That's what peace looks like. It looks like we live on a world together. We'll only be in peace together. It looks like, how do we see each other as brothers and sisters and take care of each other? And don't let other people tell you it's different. Find the moment of connection. You know, the war economy thrives on us being transactional instead of relational. Just find a way to be in relationship, to, yes, feel your anger and express your anger, like have all these emotions and feelings that we have. They will tell you what to do. It's like your wisdom is there, and we need to not shut it down. We need to be screaming in the streets. There is so much injustice. But also, this weekend is June 2020, and Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign are presenting, and you just can't miss it. You can see it on the CODEPINK page. We're signed up. He takes on militarism, racism, and poverty, and it's through the communities. And just remember, where change happens is local. Find out where the war economy isn't working in your community and do something about it. And we're here to help. You reach out. We've got lots of tools.
With these hands, I would say on the campaign trail, with these hands, we can do it. Each one, teach one, each one, reach one. All of us are endowed with some greatness, and we all can do something. I want people to believe that in their soul, even though it is very heavy. Jodie and I acknowledge that feeling. We acknowledge it. And there's a rage. We acknowledge that too. And beyond that, though, are so many opportunities to make our communities, our state, this nation, and the world. Let us not forget, we are citizens of the world. Make it a better place. So please follow CODEPINK on Twitter. Sign up. Don't just follow them. Follow them on Facebook, Instagram. Please follow Drop the Mic 2020 on Twitter. If you are not doing that yet, on Facebook, bring 5 friends with you each and every time. Share this. Share your thoughts. Have coffee clutches at your house or via Zoom or Facebook, because we know that COVID is still real and you have to protect yourself. A lot of people, it's spreading again. A lot of it has to do with more testing, obviously, and the revelation that people have it, but also if you're out there protesting, please be safe and take care of you. Wear that mask. Take some hand sanitizer with you. Keep yourself safe. And if there's an elder in your life or somebody that you can bring some hope and love to, please go visit our elders, even if it's just to wave at them outside their window. A lot of loneliness, Jodie, is setting in right now for certain groups of people in particular, and our elders are uniquely vulnerable to this moment and feeling lonely and really disconnected, because as human beings, we are meant to be social. So do what you can where you are with what you have. Be the change. You don't need a fancy title to do it, but if you do have a fancy title, we expect more from you, but you don't have to have a fancy title to be the change you want to see in the world. Jodie, I want to share with you guys that I am launching my podcast, Hello Somebody. It debuts on Juneteenth. We all know Juneteenth, the day that enslaved persons in Texas found out 2 years after the fact that they actually were free. And there's a story. What does that freedom mean? And are we really free? I wonder what my ancestors would say about what's happening in this moment. Join me on Hello Somebody. Follow me at Nina Turner on Twitter, Nina Turner Ohio. You can go to Spotify. You can go to Spotify, go to Patreon, and to Apple, Google, wherever you get your podcast. But Hello Somebody. Yes, I'm talking to you, and everybody is somebody. Jodie, I am sending you this.
Thank you.
And thank you for being in this fight, your entire team at CODEPINK, because none of us can do this great work alone. You are spectacular. And thank you for your activism and your love, and just really with such compassion, telling us, teaching us, taking us to school today about why we should care and how we can be that change that we want to see in the world. Until next time, Jodie, we are going to do this again.
Yay.
Love you.
Love you. Thank you.